Hello, everyone. Just stand by for another minute or so. We still have some people logging into the system, but wanted to let you know that we're here and ready to go. So hold tight for another minute. Thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to go and ahead and get started. So thank you, everybody, for joining today's session. Welcome to the Ask Greg series. This is our 6th episode. I'm glad to see that we have a lot of people taking advantage of these sessions. I am Greg Alevris, and I'm with Horizon Business Development, and I'm an Archibus aficionado. I've been doing this for a long, long time, more than 29 years. I am here to discuss product capability and share experiences with the broad functionality of Archibus. So let's talk about some housekeeping stuff. So number one, we will start with everybody on mute while we conduct the presentation. At the completion of the presentation, we will open the meeting for questions. You can submit questions during the presentation via the question box that appears in the control panel, or you can raise your hand and we'll unmute you and let you ask any questions that you may have. So what is it that we're trying to do with this series? Well, we certainly want to showcase those capabilities of Archibus. You'll find that about once every quarter, they're adding new functionality, and we'll try to keep you abreast of that. We have a lot of knowledge and experience within the Horizon community, both from our company point of view as well as our users, and where we can, we will share how people are doing that. As time progresses, we hope that we will engage more of the users and have them participate in a few of these sessions. But for now, we have a lot to share, so that's why you see us. And we are creating a library of material that we've been posting to YouTube so that you can go back and refer to them and share with your coworkers and help educate them on the possibilities of Archibus. And finally, we want to help grow a community forum for the software. So for today, what we're going to do is cover 3 main topics after we hit the question of the day. One are, what are some of the essential details that you need to keep track of? What are the aspects of lifecycle management that Archibus can help with? And what are some of the things that you can do to monitor and adjust changes in the data and the status of the assets in question? And then we'll conclude with our summary and open it up for questions. Today's question of the day is, my organization purchased a new laptop for one of our employees, and we want to designate the computer for reassignment. And what are ways that we can do that? And we'll hope to show you in a couple places where that might be possible. So first thing I want to get into is managing asset details and what are the different types of assets that we'd want to keep track of. So first thing to kind of keep in mind is there's a lot of ways of classifying and organizing the assets that help us understand what they are. First and foremost is the standard. We probably buy more than one of any one type of asset, whether it be a computer or a printer or a pump or a motor, doesn't really matter. Typically, we buy more than one of those, and we want to establish all the right details for it. We want to classify it based on various industry standards, as well as some of our own designations that we may have. And we want to categorize it so that it fits into certain groupings. For instance, it might be office equipment, it might be research equipment, it might be manufacturing equipment, it might be building equipment, it might be electrical. It's whatever categories you want to set up in your organization. There's a lot of detail that you want to know about the piece of equipment, and from a broad spectrum point of view, that could include things like manufacturer, like who made the asset in question, what model number did you acquire for this, because typically you buy more than, again, one of those, and you want to know the model numbers, and you want to have a reasonable description that people would recognize who are keeping track of the inventory. And then finally, there's a lot of equipment specifications that are relevant to your facilities operations that would be very useful in terms of placing assets. Certainly one of those would be dimensions. You don't want to buy an asset that doesn't fit through a doorway, for instance. So knowing the width and height and depth of it is very important kind of information. You'd want to know the weight of it. You don't want to bring in an asset that can be too heavy for a floor and cause structural damage. So again, these are important details to keep mind of. And we can talk about the overall size. We can talk about the power requirements. These are all things that have an impact of our ability to place an asset in our facility. Now, there are some standard things that we want to keep an eye on, and the Archibus product helps us know those things as it relates to other aspects of the product. Certainly one of those is location, as we all keep an eye on our floor plans and identify all the spaces where we can place people and assets. And so we want to map that location of the asset to the floor plan and physically highlight it if necessary. We want to be able to sync it up with our capital investments, like as we go through renewal of assets, what are the costs, what are the budgets, what are the timelines to update and replace key assets within our portfolio. And finally, to make sure that we maintain a long, useful life of the asset, we want to maintain a regular maintenance schedule so that there are no issues with the asset in the future. And so Archibus ties all those together and how it keeps a running history, and you'll see some of that as we get deeper into the presentation. Now, there are a lot of details that Archibus captures, once you develop the information. One of those, of course, is what is the asset identification tag? How do you designate? Is it a barcode? Is it a tag number? How does it tie to other systems? This is usually helps us relate Archibus to any of the other inventories in your enterprise platforms that you have, whether it be finance or procurement, for instance. We also, of course, want to know that model and serial number from the manufacturer, because these are specific details, as it may even tie to the warranty for the asset that you have. For us, it's important to know the equipment status. This is one of the biggest challenges that most people have with managing assets. Are we even using the asset? Is it out for repairs? Has it been disposed of already? A lot of times when assets are taken out of use, nobody bothers to update the system to identify what's going on. And that's one of the key things we want to be able to articulate in the system. Complemented with that, of course, is the condition of the asset. We want to make sure we understand what is the working condition of the asset. Something that is brand new is expected to operate at peak efficiency, whereas something that has 20 to 30 years of useful life may require an eye of maintaining it at peak performance. Because if you don't do the maintenance, you may find that that equipment fails at an inopportune time for your facility. And then, of course, we want to tie it back to the standard that we've identified so that we can make sure we know how many of these types of particular assets that we have. Now, in addition to establishing all these base details, there's a lot of other information we can capture. I'm not going to go through all of it, but some of the key things that I think are most relevant are, of course, the location of the asset, namely the building, the floor, and even the room number where relevant, that we can find that asset. And then better yet, what is the organization that that asset's assigned to? Oftentimes assets, especially those that are in the office environment or production, are assigned to a certain product or to a certain department. And finally, who's responsible for that asset? Who's the custodian that will be responsible for making sure that they know what the status of the asset is, or the asset's been assigned to them, so that if they leave, we can reassign it to somebody else. Other important details, of course, are what are the costs of the asset? How much did we spend to get it? When did we get it? What purchase order did we use? Did it come with a warranty? Does it have a service contract associated with it? There's a lot of detail that we can manage with that asset to help us maintain its peak performance and deal with any issues that arise over time. So that kind of sets the foundation of the things that we need to know. Now what we want to focus on, of course, is how do we take care of the steps that are needed to know when an asset comes on board? How do we view its useful life, and what are the things that we keep track of? And then, of course, when does it time to worry about it being disposed of? So as we look at Archibus and track all the different types of assets, whether they be building, equipment, properties, or furniture, we want to be able to look at the individual components of those inventories and understand what we're addressing. What details do we know about those assets, and what updates occur to them? So what's in service, what's been disposed of, what's put in storage, etc. So let's start by adding an asset to inventory. This is very straightforward. This is part of the asset management capabilities of Archibus. It's called the Asset Registry Console, and it has a very specific process that allows us to add new assets. One of the things that we want to do is add an asset, and the way to do that is we can actually use the type of asset, piece of equipment, and we can even get it to assign the next available asset tag or barcode, if you will, by simply just advancing the number by 1. Then, of course, we need to fill in the relevant details. Now, this may, be imported from your finance system or your procurement system. We're going to go through a manual process just to show you some of the key data elements that you want to capture. Here we are capturing the model number, and we are going to capture the serial number for the asset in question. These are unique to this individual asset. Some of the other details that are assigned equipment standard, like dimension, are applicable to all of the same asset, but these are unique and help us distinguish one asset from another. We know that this asset is new. We know that this asset is being assigned to one of our campuses, and within that campus, it's actually being put in one of our buildings. One last thing I want to do is make sure I link it back to the asset standard. And the asset standard just helps us make sure that we pick the right descriptor or the right standard for us to work with so that we can designate that particular printer or device or element. And we can assign our own descriptions to help us communicate with other people within the organization in terms of what this item is. We save those changes and record the asset in our inventory. So that is a manual way of doing it. And like I said, if you needed to, you could have imported this right from the procurement system. Now, once that asset is in the registry, we just want to verify those details. And so we're just going to do a quick search of our asset inventory just to verify. So we're going to go to a specific building where we put this asset. We're going to look just for the pieces of equipment that we have. And again, we're going to find that standard printer type standard. We'll go ahead and filter. And as it turns out, we have 2 of those. And the item in question is this new asset that we generated. Now, it's missing a lot of other details, but we're going to capture those in some different ways. And so for now, I just want to show you that it is definitely part of the asset inventory. Now let's get into looking at some of the aspects of Archibus that tell us what's going on with the asset in question and what happens over time to help us assess the value of the asset. So what we'll do is we'll now use the Archibus Asset Lifecycle Console. And what this allows us to do is to simply go in and review the assets and focus on all of the details we can find about those assets in question. Now, the asset I'm going to ultimately pick is brand new, so there's not a lot, but just to show you how Archibus helps us keep track of that, we're going to look for the new printer that we set up in the system. And with that printer, we're going to go look at the details, and we can see that it's already been assigned to a location, room 5S6666. It was installed and put into service on the 27th, and it has a life expectancy of 3 years. Now, with the asset in question, we keep a lot of transactional history. So for instance, we've made it a part of a survey, which you'll see a little bit later on. But in the meantime, we've also done some other activities. So for instance, we've already generated a work ticket for this brand new asset that we got on the 27th. And that asset was to get the item installed. And so that was the work ticket. It was completed, and it would cost us $156. In addition to that, Archibus keeps a record of any changes in the status of the asset, so that at any point in time, we make a change where we move it from one place to another, or we move it status from one to another, Archibus keeps a record of that. So at a high level, we know what the current details of the asset are, what we spent for it, again, the day it went into service, who's it's assigned to, but we can also see that it records a data element for every change that we make to the asset. So we had already updated the department, we input the cost, we assign the custodian for the asset in question. As we look at the total portfolio of assets, we have a lot of details that we can evaluate. And one of those would be, what is the condition and status of our assets? So I'm just going to adjust my screen here a little bit. And I'm going to take a look at two key metrics that we have, which help us identify two elements. One is the condition of all of our assets. So how many are new, what's in good, what's in excellent, what's in bad, etc. And then the other, of course, is status. If we click on any one of the elements of the bar chart, we see a full list of the assets, of where they are and what building they may be found in case we have to do something to replace them because we've determined it's time that they're too old to be used, etc. We can also find what assets have been designated for repair, what items have been stowage or put into storage, as an example. So here again, we have this detail that allows us to view the total portfolio and drill down into a specific set of assets for us to work with. Now, one of the nice things that Archibus has done, and this is an important element of asset management, is helping us identify some of the exceptions of data that might be missing. And this is especially important to assets because the more you know, the more you can better help manage the portfolio of assets. So we're going to look at the exceptions, and we're going to look at ways that we can go ahead and update our status. So for instance, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at our exception reports here that are part of the Lifecycle Console. We're going to focus on the equipment assets, just from a list point of view. And we're going to take a look at reports. Right now, there are no filters, but let's say we want to find any assets that are missing building data. Then that list will go in and just filter to those records and help us make sure that we fill in that. Some other reports will allow us to maybe find what's missing the assignment to an organization. So again, here we're just finding that list of assets what are missing any department division type information. And one more example, just to get a sense of the changes here. Again, we're trying to find assets that might be missing other relevant details, like what does it cost to replace the asset? Again, we see here that these records are missing it. So using the console, we can update status. And the status of this printer is we want to assign it to a new location. So we go ahead and we'll start by assigning it to a building. And it's very straightforward. We'll just go look for NCO5. And we also want to assign it to department. So it's going to be for a specific department within our operation. So we'll go ahead and assign it to the customer support group and operations. I just realized I left my camera running and I don't think you need to see that. So we'll go ahead and disable that. And then finally, we'll go ahead and save that particular set of changes for the asset in question. And now that we've done it, you get a sense that we can go ahead and update records. So back to that question, we can use the console to constantly update the status, maybe reassign it to a different person, maybe push it from in service to maybe take it into storage until we're ready to reassign the asset. So for that laptop that I mentioned in the Ask Greg question at the top, that would be an example of using the console to manage some of the change. Now, one of the things I didn't do, I did update the record, I did assign it to the building, but I still don't know where it is. And that's one of the nice things that Archibus has is some tools that help us understand where our assets are located and also how to update them out in the field. And I'm going to show you a couple examples. We'll start with a basic premise of looking at Archibus from the point of view of the average user who may be looking for things. And so there are some nice search features, which if we just go ahead and provide that in the portal for employees to say, look, I want to find something, it goes ahead and locates the asset in question, and it helps us pinpoint where it is. And here it shows it. If I had a picture of the printer, it would be the picture plus a pointer to the room in question. Now, in addition to that, if there's service I need to perform, I can certainly generate a work ticket, and it might be that I want to generate it on the piece of equipment. So rather than focusing on the floor and location, we're going to go right to the piece of equipment. And from that, the system will capture the location, which is that 5S666. And we're going to say that the paper is jammed and somebody needs to fix it. And I can't tell you how many times as a user, I never understood the more modern printers, and it was a pain in the neck to get the paper unjammed. So yes, had to generate tickets to get somebody to help me out to clean out the paper jams. So this would then take it and put out a service ticket, and it would be sent to the appropriate people. So again, one way of getting people engaged is allowing them to locate people, locate assets, request moves, generate work tickets, etc., for the system. Now, the other thing that we do, of course, is the ability to generate surveys. And so this has been a feature of Archibus for many years. And what we're going to do now is we're going to generate a survey that specifically focuses on the assets on the 5th floor of the NCO5 building. And what we're going to do is we create that survey. It's done in Archibus. Then we find all the records that would be part of that survey so that when the time is ready, the person with a mobile device can go out and capture them. So here we are taking a look at the asset in question. In this case, we're looking at one of the printers that we bought, but it's missing some of those details that I showed you before. And this is one way of capturing that information. So the way that works is we start with the asset and equipment survey, which is here in the mobile framework. The person then opens up the mobile framework. The survey would be assigned to the person. So this is based on who gets assigned the survey. They would be downloaded with all the relevant details. That would then show the list of all the pieces of equipment that have to be updated and managed. So we get into that list. We pick one of the records. In this case, we're going to go to record number 492, and we're going to fill in those details that we didn't have before. I've already taken the liberty of doing it in the screenshot. So for instance, I've updated the location. I updated the name of the custodian or the name of the person responsible for it. I had to input the division and department. And when I'm done with that, I go ahead and complete the survey. It's as simple as that. That way I'm capturing the data in the field. It's not updated the database yet, but it allows me to capture those details. Once I've updated that record and all the other records, and you can see by the second record marked in yellow that that record has been properly surveyed, and I could have done the same for all the other records, but everything else didn't require any changes, so we just updated the one record. I go ahead and complete that survey, and I sync up the data so that when I come back into Archibus and I look up that record number 492, which is this one right here, and I look down below and I look at the transaction history, those additional details that I filled in will now be part of the record. So they are captured and updated to make sure that we have the latest information. So we don't always have to go out, write things down and bring them back in and take them. We can actually use the mobile technology with Archibus to capture the data in the field and sync it back with the database in question. So in summary, for today's presentation, what I wanted to say is, it's important that we keep a detailed registry of all the assets. And those assets are, again, buildings, equipment, furniture that we may have. It's important that we maintain accurate information. Because there's such a large volume of assets, it's always very challenging for people to know what assets they have and where they're located. And by putting in the right processes and by using the tools provided by Archibus, it gives the facility managers and operators much more confidence in the details of knowing what assets they have and what the status of them and where they're situated. And then finally, it allows us to use that information to assess the performance of the assets and start making determinations of when it's time to replace and update, but at the same time, making sure that we go through the proper disposition of that asset so it's not sitting out there in our inventory records, but it doesn't even exist physically within our facilities. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. So Shoshana, do we have any questions from anybody?
The first question I have here is, which fields are available to track in the transaction manager?
I've played around with it quite a bit, and it's actually, I think anytime you update an aspect of the record, the transaction manager keeps a record of the date and time that occurred. So it affects the cost, it affects the dates, and it affects the location and custodian fields, along with the condition and things like that. So we can check on that and verify, but I was checking that on a couple of occasions, and it seemed to go pretty deep into the different fields that I was filling out.
Very nice. The second question here is, what are some, if any, missteps or mistakes you see clients make when inputting a lot of assets into Archibus under a short time frame?
I think a lot of times they take the quickest route possible, so they'll get the least amount of detail associated with that asset. So oftentimes they may have the asset barcode and maybe a brief description, but they're missing key details like location. Maybe they're missing asset maintenance history or how old the asset is. So oftentimes there's such a hurry to get the assets into the system, but they're missing a lot of the underlying details that help them assess the performance of those assets and what the plans would be for the future.
Okay, next one here. Is the mobile app able to scan a barcode of an existing asset in Archibus and retrieve that asset information?
That's a great question. The short answer to that question is yes. So the asset registry application that exists within mobile has the ability to use the camera and make it a barcode scanner and actually scan the barcode and determine if that asset is in inventory before you decide that you need to add it in as a new record in the system. So oftentimes when you're doing surveys, you want to be careful of creating a record when it already exists within the system.
Okay, next question here. If information is inputted incorrectly, i.e. the barcode, can Archibus detect that error in the system?
There are a number of exception reports that allow you to look for data that may not be accurate or correct. So typically it allows you to look for missing data, but there are a couple of places where it does identify what data might be incorrect based on what's in the system. I'll have to verify with respect to like barcode, because that's tied to the unique identifier of the asset. So typically the system would reject the record because if that record already exists, it would notify you that the record exists and it can't save the changes. But that requires a little bit more understanding of the situation that you might be faced with.
Okay. Next question, can you export large data, i.e. text or XLS files, into the EQ table rather than manual entry?
The answer to that question is definitely yes. That's definitely something that Archibus has done, and it's done with the data transfer command, which allows you to export data from Archibus, update the records in the spreadsheet, and then import the data with the changes, and it'll even tell you if there's any errors in the data, so that if there are records that don't match, it'll reject those records but import the rest. So yes, definitely a feature that Archibus has done well for the past few years.
Great, so it has both capabilities of exporting and importing?
Correct.
Great. Next question. Is it possible to view maintenance history in the Asset Lifecycle Console?
Yes, yes. So I picked an asset that just had one record to it. I'm going to actually switch to live software, something I don't normally do here. But give me a second. I'm just going to log in and set up. I should have had this up and running. I didn't think of that, but give me 1 second here while I connect here. So if I go to the Asset Lifecycle Console, like we did before, what I'm going to do is, where is it? Right here. There we go. In this case, I wanted to show this because I think it's important to understand. And when I showed the record in question, I'm going to start with a building, which is not the one that we were using, but it does have some data. The best place to see that is actually at the building level. So if I, click that record and I look at the activities for that building, what you see is a list of all the open activities, including work requests. So here, if I click, I can see the status of what work orders have been approved, what work orders have been issued. And then if I look through time, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have closed that window. You can see that I also have a list of all the work tickets that have been recently closed, that were either canceled or completed. And then once they've been archived, you can see the true history of the asset over time. So all of that would be available for the asset in question based on work requests, based on surveys, based on projects, whatever other history you have about the asset.
Next question. Is there a way that you can set up an alert or flag or even an email notification to go to a certain person that notifies them anytime a new equipment asset is added into the system?
The short answer to that question is yes. I think a lot of it depends on the work processes that you have and where that data is coming from. So is that being imported from another system, or is that data being created as by using the asset registry console? We probably would have to set up some notifications and alerts in the system to do so. I'll check to see if they exist, but I'm not familiar with them specifically. So I'll check them and we'll make sure that we add that to the video.
Next one, how does Archibus determine the asset condition?
It's really up to the user. It's the user's determination of how they determine what the condition of the asset is by observation. So there is no automated routine that sits there and says, based on how old it is, it knows what condition it is. It's truly up to the user to physically inspect the asset and make a designation on their own.
I believe we've slowed down on questions. If you have any more, feel free to add them into the question box. But yeah, those are all the questions I have.
Great. We'll be here for a few minutes, but let me just kind of talk about what's next. So we have our next episode, episode 7, is managing simple and complex moves. So we'll go through the various styles of move management that Archibus can do, and we'll walk you through them. That will be Thursday, November 19th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm sorry, we'll have changed time, daylight savings time by then, so I'll be sure to update that. And again, if you have any questions in the meantime, don't hesitate to submit them to askgreg@horizonsolutions.com. Any new questions pop in?
Yep. One other one, it says, is it possible to use the survey tool to capture info of new assets rather than existing assets?
So for new assets, I would probably use the asset registry app that's in mobile framework that allows you to actually create the record on the fly and add it to inventory. I did not demonstrate that, but it's similar to the add asset feature, but it's in the mobile framework as opposed to the browser that I showed for the example that I gave.
Okay, great. And that's all I have.
All right, so last thing is, of course, we are posting these videos to YouTube. All 6 or all 5 of the previous episodes are posted. You can go to YouTube, search for Horizon Solutions. We have a channel that we've set up. If you go to the videos and playlists, you can see a list of all the videos that have been posted there. And as the new ones are completed, they are posted and added to the catalog. So these are all the videos that we, have so far. Like I said, episodes 1 through 5. 6 will be up there within the next week or so, and we'll look forward to seeing you when we get to episode 7. With that, I guess we can say thank you, and we look forward to the next presentation, and have a good week. Take care.